Hi everyone, and welcome back to my Wargames Hobby channel. Today I'm going to have a game of Rebels and Patriots. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play through the basics of the game, so if you haven't played, you want to know how they play, and then watch this video and it'll give you a pretty good idea. And I intend to do this with other rules in the coming months, rules that I've played quite a bit and roughly know what I'm doing, and I shall then do a quick run through of the rules using a small force on the table to give you an idea of how it all works. But first of all, let me go through some of the basics of the rules with you first. I'm going to be using figures from the American War of Independence. And if you look at the back of the book, this book covers everything from the French and Indian Wars in 1754 to 63, right the way through to the American War of Independence, the Mexican War of Independence, the War of 1812, various other, anything in North America really, in the sort of 17 and 1800s, obviously including the American Civil War. There we are, there's the American Civil War lists. And in fact the last one they do is what if the British intervention force in North America, if they joined in the American Civil War. So it covers quite a wide variety of 17, 1800s, but I'm going to start with the American War of Independence. I've got a small British force and a small American force. Now it does suggest here, as you can see, it suggests a 24-point army. I'm not going to do that today. In fact, I'm just done a slightly smaller army. I've done 16 points aside, and I'll just go through those with you now. Now, a basic infantry unit, this one here, for example, the British infantry, is 4 points. I've not added any bonuses to that. You can do, if you look in the rules. It does suggest to you the different advantage or different bonuses you can have for infantry. For example, here we are, there's the book. You can make them green, you can make them veteran, you can make them good shooters or poor shooters. They all vary into how much that costs to do. But I've left the British exactly as two basic regular infantry units that do cost 4 points each. And then over here you'll see there's a unit of light infantry. They're spread out on skirmish bases. These have been given an extra bonus of being good shooters, so they hit on 4+, which I'll explain in more detail later. That's quite an expensive unit because it's normally 6 points for a unit of 12 light infantry. But giving them the good shooters is another 2, so that's 8 points. So in fact that unit is worth as much as the other 2 British units put together. You'll also see here a figure on a slightly larger base. He's the officer, and in these rules the officer always serves with one of the units, and in this case it's this unit, and he makes up one of the 12, and he's the last person usually that dies in that unit, although you can lose an officer early on, which I'll explain in a bit more detail later. Now we swing round to the American side. Now they've got 4 units, as you can see, and what I've done is I've made, this is a normal bog standard Continental infantry. It's no different to the British on the other side. Then it's got a unit of not so good infantry. These are, if you like, militia. They've been made green, so their discipline is down 1, which I'll explain in more detail later. They're poor shooters, so they only hit on 6s, whereas normally infantry hit on 5s. And if you move along here, to enable me to do that, because that normally would be 4 points, it's now down just 2 points. It's a very cheap unit. Over here we have 2 skirmish units, small skirmish units of only 6 figures each. This one I've upgraded to good shooters, so they hit on 4+, like the British light infantry. And then over the far side we have a unit of sharpshooters. So these have not only got the 4+ for shooting, but they've also got a longer range, which is 24 inches. The normal range for a musket in this period is 18 inches. So everything else shoots at 18 except for that unit over there, which shoots at 24, which does mean it should have a pretty good chance of keeping out of the way of the British muskets. So rather than go through the book and spend a long time talking about each of the things you can do, I'll just sort of cover most of those as we play the game. But the first thing you've got to do is to activate a unit. Now the British are going to move first. At the moment everybody's out of range, even the long rifles just can't hit the light infantry that are in the woods here. So the British are going to move first. I mentioned the officer here. He gives a bonus for activations to anybody that's within 12 inches of his unit. So at the moment he will help that unit and this unit as well. There's a slight advantage in that, because what you do is to activate a unit is to roll 2d6, and you must score at least 6 to be able to activate a unit, and this officer will give them a +1. So in other words, if you roll 5, they will still activate. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot to mention. You'll notice that on the figures I've got some little blue markers, some little blue cards. This is just a reminder for me that unit and this unit, they do get a bonus with their first time they shoot or in fact fight. Although in these rules it tends to be 90% of the battle seems to be shooting rather than fighting, but it can happen. So they do get a bonus the first time they shoot or fight. And I've left that card on the unit just as a reminder that they haven't shot yet, because I'm very forgetful, especially if you've got a 24 point, even a 48 point army on the table. You forget who's shot first and who hasn't. The other cards you'll see on the units are green cards, which are an advantage. That's a good shooter's card over there, which gives a +4. I've already mentioned about the other ones on the other side, and these cards are there just to remind me, like this one here, this is a green unit and it's poor shooters as well, to remind me what each unit does, because again I am very forgetful. And it's just an easy reminder if you've got little helpful cards next to the units. If at some point in the game a unit gets low on ammunition, then I've got a low on ammunition, which gives a -1 to all shooting. Right, so the British are going to activate first, and I'll roll 2 dice. Let's do this unit here first. I'll roll 2 dice. You can see it rolled 9, so that's no problem. And what I'm going to do with that unit first of all straight away is I'm going to put it into close order. That's one of the things it can do. A unit, when it activates successfully, it can either move or it can shoot, or it can go into close order, or it can try and rally. So they're the sort of things we're looking to think about what you want to do. Now, going into close order, which is what this marker indicates, I use movement trays, and sometimes in the game I take the figures off the movement trays if they're not in close order and put them on moving trays if they are. But it's a lot easier just to have these little cards to indicate that unit is now in close order, and that will give a +1 to its discipline, and a +1 to its shooting and fighting as well. So being in close order is actually quite handy. So that's what that unit has done. Now we're going to move along to the next unit. Now it only rolled a 5, as you can see, but it gains a bonus, another point bonus from the officer being with the unit, so it can actually activate. And I'm going to do the same with that unit. I'm going to form into close order. Now the unit on the far side rolled an 8, so that can move forward. Now the light infantry are in skirmish order, so they are going to be harder to hit, and now they're in a wood as well. Funnily enough, that wood in these rules doesn't give any more benefit to that unit, because a unit in skirmish order acts as though it's got cover all of the time. Basically, they're dodging about and they're not being seen. They don't get more bonus for being in there, so there's no point in them staying in there. They're going to move 8 inches just outside that wood. I didn't measure it, I better measure it. I can go a little bit further than that. So there we go, they've just moved up. Now if a normal unit was in that wood, this unit here, then it would gain the benefit of being in the wood. It would gain a little bit of cover, but the skirmishers don't. They already get that cover automatically. Right, now we're going to swing round and we're going to activate the American units. Let's start with this militia. See what we roll. Okay, well, it rolled a 666, which is obviously a pass. It will actually be able to activate. It does have a -1 for discipline, but it gets another point back for the officer nearby, so it remains on 12. Now if you roll, when activating a unit, if you roll a 1 or a 666, then something else happens. Basically the 2 ones is something negative will happen to that side, and if it's 666, something positive will happen. And there's a list in the book, if I can show you, there we are, as to what happens when you roll a 666. So you roll another dice, which is a 6, and I'll read out what that says. Reinforcements. Your senior officers see an opportunity to probe along your part of the battle line, and they've sent 4 points of reinforcements that arrive in your deployment zone, and when you successfully activate them on a move action. My goodness, so that's a good start. So straight away the Americans have got some reinforcements coming on. Now I won't do that in this game, but normally another unit would come on over here, and that can only happen once in a game. If that repeats again, then you would do something else. You would pick one of the other advantages, there we are, on this section here. But for this demonstration game, I won't do that. So anyway, they can move. They are going to move forward. They're not going to go into close order yet. I don't know whether that's a mistake, but they won't go in close order. They've just moved up. Now the next unit, 8, yes, that can activate as well. They'll just move up. There we go. And now the skirmishers. Now they are actually in range, and so are the rifles. So let's activate these first. 10, yeah. So that can open fire on the light infantry over here. You have to fire at the nearest target, even if these were in range, and they're not. I'll tell you how far away they are. Yeah, they're 25 inches away. But even if they were in range, you can't fire at this unit here because they're nearer. They're the biggest threat. In these rules, you have to fire at the nearest enemy unit. So they're going to open fire. Now, in these rules, this is one of the unusual things that some people sort of find a bit strange, but it seems to work quite well. In these rules, you don't fire just 6 figures. If that unit starts off at 6 and it's at full strength, you roll 12 dice. And that's the same for all the units on the table. Whether you're 12 strong or 6 strong, you roll 12 dice. Now, if you remember, I did say to you they're good shooters, so they're hitting on 4+. So they hit on every 4, 5 and 6. Not necessarily kill, which I'll explain in a minute. Let me just roll first of all to see how many 4s, 5s and 6s we get. Which is not a bad roll, that actually, is it? Only 4 misses. So they've got 8 hits. So that's a good positive start for the Americans. Now normally every 2 if I spread these out, normally if they were within close range, every 2 dice would be a kill. But if you're over 12 inches, which they clearly are, it becomes every 3 dice you get a kill. So those would be then discounted. So it would be 2 casualties. But the other thing is these light infantry in skirmish order, so it becomes 1 in 4. As it happens, it's still going to be 2 kills, isn't it? There we are. So this unit open fire, you've got 8 hits, which represents 2 kills. I've got to take 2 figures off. There's no saving. Those figures are removed. So the light infantry have already taken 2 casualties. Now, because it's taken a casualty, immediately the light infantry will have to do a morale test. And you roll 2 dice and it scores 9. You have to take 2 off for each casualty that it took, so it's now down to 7. It hasn't got any disorder markers, but you would normally drop 1 if it had a disorder marker, and then you modify it by the unit's discipline, which is 0, so that it gets no benefit there, or if it was in close order, which it isn't, and or if the officer's unit is within 12 inches. There's the officer's unit over here, which it is. So it gains a bonus there. It goes back up again to 8. So it's not a problem. It's passed the test. It must pass on 6 or over, and if it does that, it's fine. If the unit was only on 3, so anything 3, 4, 5, it would take a disorder marker. That's what would happen, but it isn't. It's fine. And if it was below that, if it was 2 or under, it would take 2 disorders markers, but more about that later. So that unit's fine. It's lost 2 men, but its morale is okay. But now we've got the other unit over here. We've got to activate them. Whoops. We've got to activate them. Oh, would you believe it? Another 6. Crikey. What's going on here? And another 6. Now, I mentioned earlier about that would normally indicate a fresh unit coming on. It can only happen once in a game. I'm not doing it today because I'm just doing a demonstration. But what it can do is can now choose one of the other advantages. So in fact, I'll do that instead. So the unit, if we pick the next best one, the unit just activated fights with determination and gains a +1 to its discipline. Oh, that's very good. So I'm going to give a +1. I'm going to have to put, going to have to find the card for that. So I'm going to give it this +1 discipline. And in fact, in all fairness to the unit, the militia that rolled a 6 as well, I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to take away their green card here rather than, so increase it by +1, which removes that. So to be fair, they rolled 2 6s. They should gain a benefit there. So I'll make an executive decision, and they've had 2 other things happen instead rather than the reinforcements. I'm just being lazy. I don't want to get another unit out. So that's pretty good. So obviously they do activate, and they're now going to. Now they've got 2 options here. At the moment they are within range. They're actually, but they're also in the light infantry in range of them, and they might not want to be shot at. Although in all fairness, the nearest unit are these over here. So if the light infantry do fire, they've got to shoot this way. Even if you take it from the middle of the unit, that's 13 inches away, and that's 16. But they could, in fact, do half a move, go back a little bit, and still shoot. But they would only shoot then at half effect, and at that range, they're not likely to be doing much damage. So they're just going to stay there and shoot again. So they've got 12 dice. Let's just see what happens when we roll 12 dice. Again, they are sharpshooters, so they are hitting on 4s. Well, that's not as good, is it? Look at that. Very poor roll. only 3 hits. So as I said earlier, 2 would normally be a kill, but it's at long range, so it becomes 3, and because they're in skirmish order it becomes 4. So in fact they didn't take a casualty. The long rifles missed. That's a bit unfortunate, but there we go. That's life. So the Americans have now completed their move, and it's the British turn now. Swing round here. Right, I'm just going to check the ranges. We've got to see whether they're within. They're not within musket fire yet, although the light infantry here are in range of one of the continental units. So the British are going to attempt to move forward. So let's roll the dice. 10 is not a problem. So they're doing a 6-inch move forward. And the same over here, not a problem. They're all moving up. Take their close order. The close order thing, incidentally, is doesn't reduce how far you move, but it does help for morale and when you shoot. Although you have to be within 12 inches to gain that benefit, which neither of them are still at the moment, so they're not going to gain any benefit from being close order for shooting yet. Now the light infantry can now shoot if they wish, which they will do. The nearest target is here, so you're going to shoot across this continental unit. They've got 12 dice. Oh, we've got to activate them first. That would help, wouldn't it? Don't forget to activate first. Oh dear. Whoops. Did you see that second dice? Look at that. 2 1s. Now this is where sometimes bad things could happen. Well, actually it's a 6. It's not a bad dice. But that, first of all, that unit has failed to open fire now because it rolled 2 1s. And now I've got to look on now normally on here on the list of things that happen, it rolled a 6. That's where you're using honor in a game. The officer gains or loses an honor, but in fact we're not using honor. I'm not using that part of the rules for this game. The honor, the officer rules, where you can the unit or the officer gets honor, it goes up or down, is really used in a campaign game, so we're not using that. So I go down to the next section. But the unit you tried to activate automatically gains the disorder marker due to confusing orders. So the light infantry are going to gain a little green token, which means it's now disordered. So that was pretty useless. So the Americans need to try and take advantage of this. The British have already been thrown into confusion. The light infantry not opening fire when they could have done. Right, let's start over here with the militia first of all. Let's see if we activate them. 5. They gain 1 from the officer, and it's 6. It would normally have dropped 1 because it was a green unit, but they got promoted, didn't they, in the field because they rolled that double 6, so they can activate. They are now on 6 and they can activate. The British infantry facing them are just about in range. Let's move that back. Yeah, they're 14 inches away, but the musket range is 18 inches. So they're going to open fire. Now they only hit, this is a poor shooting regiment, so they only hit on 6s. But let's just see what happens anyway. Well, they scored 1 6, and that is not going to do any damage because they would normally be, if it was within 12 inches, they'd hit on 2s with 2 dice. Because they're long range, it's going to take 3 6s to kill 1 figure, and they missed. So that was pretty rubbishy. Now the Continentals are going to open fire as well. 6 plus 1 with the officer, 7. So yes, they can open fire, and they're rolling all 12 dice, and they need 5s and 6s to hit. There we are, we got 4 of them. So 4 hits. And what have I said? Normally hit on 2s, it's long range, it's 3s. So a casualty has been caused. Now what you then do is you roll 2 dice because that unit contains the officer. So they have taken a casualty, and I'm now just going to roll to see whether the officer has in fact become a casualty rather than one of the figures. And what you do is you roll 2 dice, well, it's clearly okay, it's on 11. Because what you do is, if let's say for example I'd rolled 2 1s, if I'd rolled really badly, and then you take 1 off for each casualty, which was only 1, and if the score is 1 or lower, then the officer would have been a casualty. So if I'd rolled 2 1s there, taken off the 1 for the figure at lost, the officer would have been a casualty. If it's 1 or under, it becomes a casualty, but it clearly didn't. I rolled well over that, so they're fine. Over here now for the skirmishers, they're going to open fire on the nearest target, which are the light infantry again. Still, again, they're rolling 12 dice. Oh, hitting on 4s. That's pretty good, really. Look at that. 8 dice. So remember what I said, they're hitting to actually kill a figure there. It's going to take 4 dice for each one. Normally kill on 2s, but because it's long range and because they're in open order, it's 4. So it's 2 more casualties though. So the British light infantry are getting hit badly. So they've got a roll for morale again, 2 dice. Now it rolled 6, but it lost 2 figures, so it goes down to 4. It does gain the bonus for the officer's unit being within 12 inches, so it goes back up to 5 again. However, that's not a pass, is it? Because as I said earlier, a pass is 6. So that unit will gain another disorder marker. So it's now got 2 disorder markers, which means when it's its turn, it will have to try and rally. It doesn't have an option, it must try and rally. And now the last unit to open fire is in the far corner are the long rifles. So again, hitting on 4s. Oh dear, these Americans are rolling well now, aren't they? Look at that. Another 2 casualties. Now, what's happened here, I mean, this is really painful for the light infantry. They're getting absolutely hammered over there. They've lost 2 more figures. They have to do a reaction test, but before they do that, they've reached half strength and they gain what's known as a permanent marker. And that goes down before you even do a reaction test. Now the problem with that is that once you have 3 disorder markers, then you're out. They go. They don't even get a chance to test because they have got the 3 disorder markers. If it had only had 1, we could have done a test to see what would have happened. But in fact, it had 3. So automatically that unit has now disappeared. They took a real hammering. That was some really strong shooting by the 2 American skirmish units, and the light infantry have paid the price. So it's game over already. The British are really in trouble here. They've got to pull something out the bag with their 2 remaining units on the table, or it's going to be all over. So let's just do now the British to move. So first of all, this close unit here will try and activate. Yes, it rolled a 9. Now it's got a couple of options here. It can either move forward a little bit more to get within 12 inches, which will you'll get a bonus then for shooting. Or it can open fire at a slightly longer range. I think they're going to move forward. I think the British have got to try and get as near as they can and then do some serious shooting on the enemy. And the other unit will try and activate as well. which was 5, but it gains 1 from the officer, 6, so it can move forward. It's going to move forward. Now it's the Americans again. Start off with the militia. Roll 2 dice. It rolled a 3. It gains 1 from the officer, 4, but it's not enough, so they failed to activate. Now roll for the Continentals. Oh, 4. Gains 1 from the officer being there, 5. It's not enough. They failed to activate as well. Crikey. That's a shame. The Americans were in a very strong position. Now 2 units have failed to activate. Now let's do the skirmishers over here. Right, let's see what we get. 5 hits. Normally 2s becomes 3s because of the range, so it has caused a casualty. But only the 1. The unit would have to do a morale test. Oh, it's no problem with 11, is it? And then the final unit in the far corner are going to open fire. Oh, they just rolled 4. Crikey. So they won't open fire. They failed to activate as well. So the Americans had a real chance there of doing some serious damage on the British, and they failed to activate 3 of their 4 units. That was really unfortunate. So now it's the British turn again. Right, this unit is now going to activate to fire on the militia. Yeah, it rolled a 9, so that's no problem. So it normally hits on 5s and 6s. Because it's first time firing, I'm going to remove that marker now. It now hits on 4 5s and 6s. But because it's close order and it's doing volley fire, it's sitting on 3 4s, 5s and 6s. Let's just see what they roll. I'll just take out the 1s and 2s. There's only 3 of them. So they've got 9 hits. And because it's close range, every 2 is a kill. So 4 figures have been shot by the British infantry. They now have to do a test. A bit of a disaster. They rolled a 4. They lose that 4 because of the casualties they've taken. It does gain 1 point for having the officer nearby, but it's effectively on 1. But I'll read what the morale test reads. It says, if failed, then the final total is 2 or less. The unit immediately gains 2 disorder markers. So there we are. 2 disorder markers are given to that unit, not 1. I nearly made a mistake there. It must also retreat half a move, and it must try and rally next move. So that was a good volley from the British. Now this unit are going to do the same. They're going to first of all try and activate. Yes, it rolled a 7, but it becomes an 8 because of the officer, and it's in close order. It becomes 9, so it can open fire. It'll open fire on the Continentals, and they want again 3 4s, 5s and 6s. So let's see what they get. Well, they got 7 hits, which is 3 figures from the Continentals. So the Continentals have taken 3 casualties off. The first thing we have to do is roll to see whether the officer became a casualty. Now it rolled 5. Take 3 off for the casualties, and it was on 2, so he did survive. And then the unit must take a reaction test. It rolled 6. Again, you've got to take 3 off for the casualties that were caused. It gains 1 back for the officer, which puts him on 4. So it failed its test, but it's not an absolute disaster. If it failed but the final is above 2, the unit adds a disorder marker, so it just gains a disorder marker. Right, so that's the British turn, quite effective fire there, and now it's the American turn. We'll start with the militia here. They have 2 disorder markers, so they must try and rally. They have no option. They rolled a miserable 5. They gain 1 from the officer, which is 6, so it's on 6 at the moment. But it's got 2 disorder markers, so it goes down to 4. And on a rally, if it failed but the total is above 2, the unit remains disordered. It must immediately also retreat half a move, so it's got to go back further, another 3 inches. Then the militia are in trouble here. And it does stay in disorder. Now this unit has got to roll next. It doesn't have to. It's only got 1 disorder marker, so it can stand there and open fire. What happens is, when that happens, it only rolls 6 dice rather than the 12. So it's got the option to either try and rally that off, or fire at half effect. The problem with rallying it off, even if they did rally it off, it can't do anything else. And that's one of the things in the rules that some people don't like. The fact that once you get disordered, it's very difficult to do anything else more in the game, because you can keep getting shot at when it's not your turn and keep getting disordered, and you spend the whole time trying to rally, and even if you do rally, you still can't do anything. We did introduce a house rule where we allowed units, if they did rally, to be able to do another activation, but that's not in the original rules. So whether you want to do that or not, it's up to you. The other option is it doesn't have to rally, so it will just open fire with the 6 dice. And that's what I think we're going to get that to do. So it's hitting on 5s. It's got 2 hits, which at that range is enough to cause a casualty. So that was a good thing for them to do. Incidentally, this unit had to try and rally because it's got 2 disorder markers. It doesn't have an option. So the British now here have to roll a test, a reaction test. It rolled 7, 1 for the officer, 1 extra for it being in close order. It's fine. So now we're going to activate the 2 skirmish units over the far side. The nearest one first. 11, yes, that's going to open fire on this unit. It's 18 inches away. It's 15 inches, in fact. It's got a range of 18 inches. And it's still firing on full effect, and it's hitting on 4s. One, 2, 3, 4 hits. And at that range, it's every 3 hits because it's over 12 inches, but they're not, of course, in skirmish order, so they don't gain any advantage there. So it is another casualty. And the officer may be a casualty. Let's just see whether he is or not. No, it's fine. He rolled a very high 9, so that's okay. And now the fire unit, the rifles are going to open fire. Let me just make sure they're within 24 inches, which they are. So they're going to open fire with full 12 dice. Oh, still not brilliant. 3 hits, which relates to another figure lost. Whoops. Let's just see whether the officer was a casualty or not. Whether he was the casualty. No, he wasn't. And that unit must do a test. Well, it rolled 5. It's got the officer in his close order, so it's fine. It's still in one piece. So the unit is still 7 strong, so it's still okay. So now it's the British move. Now the British really do need to try and finish off the American line infantry here. And they are both within 12 inches, so they're going to do volley fire again. They're both still rolling 12 dice. Now, they're in close order. Oh, that's lost their first fire, hasn't it? In fact, they all have. I mustn't forget to take those off. I keep forgetting to, I have those first fire markers to remind me which units have got first fire, which units haven't, and then I forget to remove them when they do first fire. Right, so these are going to fire. They normally hit on 5s, but they're doing a volley fire, which means they're hitting on 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6 hits on the militia. 1, 2, which is 3 figures. So it immediately gains a permanent disorder marker because it's gone down to half strength. The fact that it already has 2 disorder markers, if the unit, let me read this out. I must also immediately retreat. All right. If the unit has 3 disorder markers, in total it routs and is removed from play. So that unit has finally routed. The militia, which is not surprising really. Now, one thing I forgot to do earlier when the light infantry routed was to do a test, because any unit within 12 inches that witnesses a friendly unit routing has to do a test. So this unit has to do a test, and I didn't do that with the British. I'll do it in a minute. Right, it rolled 6. It gains 1 from the officer, but it loses that because of the disorder mark, but it stays on 6. So in fact that was fine. The British should have done that. The fact that they were in close order and they had a British officer, they probably would have been all right. But if you just roll for it and see what they would have done. There we are. It would have been fine. With 6, they would have gained another 2, so it would have been fine. So that was my mistake for not remembering that when a unit routs, a friendly unit routs within 12 inches, you have to take a test. Easily forgotten. So that was the firing from this unit. Now these others are going to open fire. Again, they've still got 12 dice and they're hitting on 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hits, which is 4 figures. Now first of all, let's roll to see whether the officer is going to lose 4 anyway. Let's just take 4 off. 1, 2, 3, 4. We want to see whether the officer is a casualty or not. Oh, that's a bit of a problem, because you take 4 off because of the casualties, and it is obviously 1 or under. So if the score is 1 or under, which it is, the officer was one of those casualties, so it's still got 5 men there. But now immediately that unit gains a permanent marker because it's down to half strength, or less. In fact, in this case, it's less than half strength. And the unit has to do a test now. Incidentally, this unit will have to do a test in a minute as well, because the officer died and that unit won't. So we'll finish off doing this unit first though. So I roll 2 dice for this unit. 6. It goes down 2 because of the 2 disorder markers. It's on 4. Has to rout as well. Oh dear, it's all going horribly wrong for the American force. Now let's just move those out of the way. If you remember, I said that the skirmishers will have to take a reaction test for the, first of all for the officer, I think dying. So it has to roll 2 dice. Not very good. 5. It hasn't got any casualties itself, and it's got no, obviously it wasn't fired on, and there's no disorder markers. So it's got no minuses, but it's also got no bonus. There's no officer nearby now. So it's on 5, which means it's failed. So it takes a disorder marker. And that's the British turn. Or the Americans have sort of collapsed, really, haven't they? They are in deep trouble now. They've got 2 units on the table and no officer. But it is their turn. So this unit here will open fire on the nearest infantry unit, and it is only firing now 6 dice because it's got a disorder marker. I could try and rally it, but to be honest, it hasn't got an officer nearby. And if it does rally, it can't do anything else. So let's just roll to see what happens. The trouble is, it's going to have to get 3 hits to cause a casualty. And it doesn't. You can see there, only 2 hits. The others were 1s and 2s. So that failed to score a hit. But the strong unit in the corner is the long rifles. They're opening fire on the same unit. Oh, that's a bit better. Yeah, so that's caused 7 casualties. Sorry, so that's got 7 hits. It takes 3 to cause a casualty, so 2 casualties come off that unit. Now we've got to roll to see whether the officer is a part of that. No, it isn't, but it does take a permanent marker, because it's below half strength now, or at half strength or below. And then it does take a test. It's 6. It gains 1 for the officer, and it gains 1 it's no longer in close order. I must take that away, because it can only be in close order if it's got 6 figures. But anyway, it rolled a 6, and the officer gives it 7, but they lose 1 because of the permanent marker, so it's on 6. So it does pass, just about. Now it's the British turn. Well, the British have got to move up now. They're not within range. So this unit first here. 8, yeah, so it's going to do a 6-inch move. This unit, they cannot try and rally because it's a permanent disorder marker. So they will open fire, but with only 6 figures. Now the problem with that, they got no option really. The problem with only opening fire with 6 is that that skirmish unit is over 12 inches away, and it's in skirmish order. So it's going to need 4 hits to actually cause a casualty, but you never know. It needs, this is only of course hitting on 5s and 6s where it's nowhere near, only scored 1 6. So it didn't do any damage at all. And now it's the American turn. So the Americans now, this unit's going to try and rally. 5. It doesn't, and it can't do anything else. It just stands there. The long range rifles are going to open fire again. This is the unit that could win this game. So we're going to open fire on the nearest unit, which are those 4s, 5s and 6s. Yeah, that's going to be painful. They're going to lose 2 more men. Must do a morale test. Well, it's rolled 8. Take away the 2 for the casualties it just lost. Taking away another 1 for the disorder marker, but then the officer's still there. Actually, we didn't roll to see whether the officer had died, did we? Hold on a minute, let's do that. No, he doesn't. So, believe it or not, that's still okay, which is surprising, isn't it? It's got to roll very low before it gets into trouble. So the British move, do these open fire, they're a long way away yet. No, they're just going to move forward. Yep, they do. Move forward, 6 inches. But it gains 1 back for the officer, so it's on 6. So it is okay, but it's got a permanent disorder marker now, which means it's only going to be shooting at 6. It's it's its own turn, the British turn. It's enough to cause a casualty on the Americans. They must do a test. I mean, this game is over effectively. Yeah, definitely is now, because they only rolled a 3. So that unit, because it gained a red marker anyway, because it's now at half strength, and it's just gained another one, which means it routs. In fact, the game, once you've lost 75% of your total points to start with, the game is effectively, well, it ends. That unit was actually worth 6 points. It was quite an expensive unit to have on the table. So in theory, while it was still on the table, it was fine, but it just went. Losing the officer was pretty crucial for the Americans there. So that's a quick run through. I mean, I did sort of go through it quite quickly, but you can see how easy it is to keep momentum going. The British got off to a bad start when they lost their light infantry, but their regulars got within close range, within 12 inches in close order, which meant they could do volley fire, and volley fire was very effective. Unfortunately, the militia went first, and then the Continentals couldn't survive, and when they lost their officer as well. The 2 skirmish units caused a lot of casualties, but they couldn't win the battle on their own. They nearly did, in actual fact, because, you know, you can see how low these units were. They lost the 6-point light infantry, and they lost nearly another unit here. So it was pretty close, actually. Could have gone either way. There are some scenarios in the book, at the back here, the scenarios, what the objectives are, special rules, ending the scenario, etc. And these scenarios are very good in actual fact, and I would suggest you use them, or any other scenario. I just did a straight battle, which it isn't ideal really for any set of rules. It's nice to have an objective. But I just decided, just for today, we'd just do a straight face-off with 2 forces, just to show you the basics of the rules. But I would highly recommend you do the scenarios, because the ones that I've done in the book are very, very good. Or you just do your own scenario, make up your own one. But I think you should always have an objective in mind, rather than just face off 2 armies and start shooting each other. Although, you know, it's reasonably good fun. It's better using scenarios, I think, anyway. Right, so that's it, guys. It's just a quick game. I hope you've learned something from that, enough to persuade you to go out and buy them. They're not an expensive set of rules, in actual fact. I think they're $9.99. I can't see the price on there, but they're under a tenner, I think. Oh, here we are. Well, actually, they're $12.99, but I'm sure I got this. It was a bit cheaper in a shop. I'm sure I paid $9.99, but anyway, even if it's $12.99, that's not a lot of money for what is a reasonably easy set of rules to play. They're a bit of fun. If you don't like a couple of things in the rules, which a couple of the guys at my club don't, you can do house rules to make them play differently, but I think they're fine. I mean, it's the same for both sides, and I've had many a good game with them. But say there's a few guys that think they're a little bit too simple, but then for an evening game, quite frankly, you don't want anything too complex. You don't want to be sat half the evening with your face in a book trying to work out, you know, trying to find things you're not sure about. With these, generally you don't spend that much time looking. Once you've read through them, it's pretty self-explanatory. So, you know, give them a try. They're a nice set of rules, and they give a good game. This was a very small game, only 16 points. 24 points is a normal game, and I have had double that in a big game, and it was quite good fun still. Right, so see you again soon. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll all be wargaming again soon. If not, enjoy solo gaming at home. See you again soon.